Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. And today we'll help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions about how do you manage hybrid teams and remote teams, specifically through performance evaluations. That's what we want to focus on. You want to make sure that your hybrid team members, that your remote team members are accountable, and it's challenging to do so through traditional performance evaluations. Why is that? Well, traditional performance evaluations, here's what happens. They're usually done annually, semi-annually, more rarely per quarter. And what they usually rely on is the supervisor's sense of how much time the supervisee, the employee, has spent working, has spent doing stuff. They're poorly suited for hybrid and remote work naturally because you see the supervisee much less. The supervisor does not observe the supervisee nearly as much. So it's much harder for the supervisor to say how much time the supervisee has spent working and how productive they were, what their accomplishments were. So the performance accountability metrics are really off, and they have been throughout the pandemic. This has been a real problem and a source of great anxiety for supervisors and supervisees alike, especially supervisors. So the supervisors have not been sure how to evaluate their supervisees. The supervisees don't think as much about supervision and evaluation, but the supervisors, the bosses, the leaders, they have had a lot of struggle with knowing how to evaluate their supervisees, their employees, their team members during this period of time. And now that we're moving into the future of work with hybrid work, with remote work becoming the norm, becoming what will be the future going onward, long after the pandemic, this is the future of work, we need to really answer the question of how do you update the performance evaluation system for the future of work. And how you need to do that is to revise it, to really actually measure performance. Not measure time work, but measure performance in the form of accomplishments, in the form of deliverables, in the form of actually how productive each employee is in doing their individual tasks, so the individual things that they're assigned to work on, and the work that they're doing with team members, the collaborative tasks, cross-functional team projects in the same team, whatever. All of these things that they are working on in terms of collaborating with others also need to be measured and evaluated. You probably heard the phrase that what gets measured gets managed. Well, if you measure people's time spent working, that will be what gets managed. People will work a long time. But if you can't observe their time spent working, well, really, you're not going to be able to manage that, right? That's obvious. And honestly, do you really need them to be working, or do you need them to produce stuff? Do you need them to do deliverables, to get the accomplishments done? You need them to get the accomplishments done. You don't need them to actually just spend their time working. So the focus should be on deliverables, should be on accomplishments, however the employee gets them accomplished. So you as the supervisor need to be thinking about that. So what that involves, this transition to a supervision style of performance evaluation suitable for the future of work means many frequent evaluations that are much smaller than the annual or semi-annual review. So instead of that large annual review, do brief evaluations, ideally weekly or bi-weekly, or at the most, you want to do them no less than once a month. And that's for the most independent. So for my clients, when I'm working with clients, I've done that for researchers who spend their time researching. And because that's a very independent projects, that may be okay to do once a month, or kind of creative R&D folks. So researchers. But if you're going to do it for regular employees, or lots of various types of employees, from software programmers to administrative staff, once a week is great. Bi-weekly, if that depends on the amount of autonomy and how much independence and the length of their project tasks. But generally, weekly is what I recommend. And then occasional 360-degree evaluations, meaning giving the employee feedback from other employees on their team. But basically, the main way that you'll be evaluating them is once a week, brief evaluations. And that actually reduces the amount of time that supervisors spend on supervision, because those meetings with the employee take care of a lot of random conversations that you would have had with the employee anyway. So it's a much more effective way of collaborating with employees, supervising them, and having the supervisors spend their time more effectively with each employee. So that is what you want to be thinking about. What that means is that you conduct a brief check-in meeting of 15 to 30 minutes with each supervisee once a week. So 15 minutes to 30 minutes, that's actually every other week if you want to do that, or once a month for the rare cases. And usually once a week it's going to be a little on the shorter side. I've seen it take as short as 10 minutes, but 15 to 20 minutes is going to be the regular length. For hybrid workers, you'll definitely want to do this in person to discuss maybe some challenging things if they come up. And of course, for remote workers, do it remotely. All right, what happens? The supervisee submits a report 48 hours before each meeting. So before the meeting, if the meeting is scheduled on Wednesday, on Monday, the supervisee would send in a report 48 hours before it. And what that involves is a self-evaluation report including things like the key thing is the top 3 to 5 accomplishments that they set out to do for the week. So in the previous report, in the previous meeting, you would have decided on what their top 3 to 5 accomplishments should be. And then this week, they'll discuss what their top 3 to 5 accomplishments actually were. Most of the time, they should align with what they should have been. If things came up, of course, if emergencies came up, then that should shift. So comparing the accomplishment set to what actually happened. And again, sometimes those will shift and that'll be fine. Sometimes they should have shifted, but the employee wouldn't have realized it. And then you want to be thinking about that. Well, how's the employee making his decisions about what to do and what not to do? And sometimes the employee will be doing too much urgent and not important things, whereas you really want them to work on some important, not urgent things. So you want to be thinking about those. Then their plan for next week. What do they want to do? What is their top 3 to 5 accomplishments for next week? And then the supervisor responds briefly to the self-evaluation report. In the self-evaluation report, it's going to be brief. It's going to be a page, then just a brief email by the supervisor. So sends response to the report. Again, it's going to be under a page, usually several sentences, at least 24 hours before the meeting. All points in the supervisee's reports, but again, a brief response, because then you'll get into it in the meeting itself. Now, the report also should contain what challenges the supervisee faced in achieving the goals, and what measures they took to address these challenges, and what they plan to do to address such problems in the future. Also, the professional development. What are they doing in their professional development based on what they set out to do? So they should have some activities that they are doing for their professional development, and then you want to see how actually they did in these activities. Then a self-evaluation rating, so evaluating themselves, how they did. 0, greatly below expectations. 1, somewhat below expectations. 2, meeting expectations. 3, somewhat exceeding expectations. And 4, greatly exceeding expectations. Or whatever system you have, but that's kind of a standard system. Okay. Going on to the check-in meeting, and that's going to be the weekly check-in meeting, 15 to 20 minutes, closer to 10 if everything is going fine. So you clarify all the points listed in the report. The supervisor provides coaching to the supervisee on helping resolve problems, addressing all those challenges. How do they improve, how productive they are, enhancing their relationships with others as needed. So that depends on their cross-functional team projects with those teams, their internal team projects. So those activities, their collaborative activities. And then discuss their self-evaluation and what they plan to do for the next week. So the supervisor accepts or revises the self-evaluation given by the employee and the plans for the week, explains the reasoning to the team member, and then gives the team member a chance to describe their thoughts on it before making a final decision. Now, that's the weekly reports. That all gets fed into a quarterly performance report. So that includes the final evaluations from each weekly meeting that gets fed into that report. And then those things include, that's 60 to 80% of the weekly of the report. So the 60 to 80% of the quarterly performance report comes from those weeks that make up the quarter. So about 13, 14 weeks that make up the quarter. Then 20% comes from evaluations, the 360 feedback evaluations by fellow team members. If that's applicable, if you're working as part of a collaborative team, then that's going to be 20%, the 360-degree evaluations. And then a general 20% score by the supervisor for the supervisee for the quarter based on their progress over the quarter and the sense of that person's development over time. So that's what you're going to be doing. Now, what are the benefits of it? Why should you spend your time? Well, obviously, it's going to save you time. I already mentioned that. So if this technique saves time, it really helps address a number of problems, prevent a number of fires and challenges that would come up, and also helps address those everyday small interactions and meetings that you would have with your supervisee anyway. So it helps supervisees a lot. So besides those, it helps supervisees a lot. It helps them know where they stand, which is incredibly important and valuable, especially in a hybrid and remote team environment where they have less connections with their supervisor. So they also know where to improve. So they don't only know where they stand right now, but they also know where and how to improve going forward. It reduces their career worries. So it's harder to know where you're standing and your career situation, and addressing that is very helpful for hybrid and remote team members because they don't see their supervisor as much, they don't know what's going on, so they know where they stand. It addresses career concerns. And especially for those people who tend to have more proximity to supervisors, there's more concern, by people who have less proximity. So let's say you're a hybrid team member, you come in once a week, and there are other people who come in 4 days a week, and you're kind of concerned about your career growth. This helps address that concern. For supervisors, it helps mitigate problems. I already mentioned that. That's a really critical area. It helps improve the relationship. So improve your relationship to that person. And that, of course, help that person be connected to the organizational culture. That is very helpful. But the main indicator of whether somebody is retained, so the retention, engagement, morale, is their connection, relationship to that supervisor. So it's going to be really important for you. So that's retention and morale. So those are the critical things you want to be thinking about for that performance evaluation. So this is the key, this revised performance evaluation that's going to be a fit for the future of work is how you want to manage hybrid and remote teams. All right, everyone. I hope you've valued and benefited from this episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please subscribe to the show on wherever channel you heard it, whether it's YouTube, you heard it via videocast, or on a podcast, on iTunes or Amazon or wherever you heard it. Please subscribe and please share your comments, leave your thoughts, click like if you liked it, and share it with your friends and family. That's the best thing that you can do. Please make sure to leave a review, again, on whatever channel you heard it. That's super helpful. Lets other people know about the show and what you like about it. And send me your thoughts about the show and any questions you might have to Gleb, Gleb, at disasteravoidanceexperts.com. All right, everyone. I hope you find this valuable and beneficial, and I look forward to seeing you on the next show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.